Hello everyone, how are you all doing today? My name is Shaquisha Barnes, and I am a student at Sam Houston State University studying to get a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies with a minor as an E through 6 generalist. And I want to talk to you today about a certain topic that I believe is important for all future educators. The topic up for discussion is, wait for it, main topic today is inclusion. First, let me hop out the porch. I'm just kidding. Back to the serious topic at hand, inclusion. For those of you that don't know what inclusion is, or for those that think they have an idea but aren't really quite sure, let me make sure I get you on the right track. I'm going to give you two definitions today. I'm going to give you the book definition and my personal definition. In the book, Special Education for All Teachers, the definition for inclusion is the process of educating students with disabilities in the general education setting. Now let's put that in simpler context, i.e. my definition. This basically just means teaching and educating all students in one classroom and not letting any of them feel like they are not getting the education that they need because they have the disability. Now, don't let this freak you out. It's a very simple concept. All students should feel that they are not getting less of an education because they have a disability. They should feel like they're just like any other student going to school and learning, because they are. They may learn differently than some people, but they learn the same way or in different ways. Now, I know some of you are thinking, how am I supposed to show inclusion in my classrooms without singling out or paying too much attention to one student in particular? Well, I'm glad you're wondering that. Let me answer that for you. There are several different strategies that you can use as an educator to enforce inclusion in your room, but also at the same time not making your student feel singled out. I'm just going to drop a few. First one, teaching in small bits and pieces, or chunking information, meaning using a step-by-step approach. The educator will be teaching the students small bits and pieces and repeating and going over the information multiple times to hopefully allow information to sink into the student's memory. It's always a good idea to try and chunk information into small bits of information in hopes that the student will grasp the concept that is being taught. Some people may say that this is a very time-consuming way of using inclusion within the classroom. However, I strongly think that this is one of the best ways to try and make sure that your student fully grasps the concept and curriculum that is being taught. I say that to say that if you break it down, the odds are the repetition of the curriculum that is being taught is going to sink in to your student's mind rather than just going over it one time. And this is a great way to show inclusion, because you don't just have to break it down with one student. You can break it down and chunk it in information with all of your students. That way all of your students are retaining the information. On to the second one. Another strategy for helping with inclusion in the classroom would be seeing if the educator can make modification and accommodation for the students if necessary. For example, if you have a student in your classroom that are visually impaired, having a printed out hand sheet ready for the student so they will be prepared for their curriculum. I believe that the technique would work, especially if you print out the curriculum by the week for the student. Meaning that if you have a student that has a problem hearing, and we can even use seeing, then having a paper copy of the assignments right in front of the student would work better, and they would already know what they're supposed to be learning, and it's just right there. You don't have to worry about saying, can you hear, you can sit in the front, because they already have a visual aspect in their hands. The last strategy that I would like to visually talk on is teaching techniques. There are various different ways you can teach a subject or topic. Not everyone learns the same. Therefore, it is the teacher's responsibility to try and teach in multiple different ways so that every student can feel like they're getting taught. Therefore, throughout all my years in school, I'm pretty sure yours too, I have learned about how students learn through multiple different outlets. Some learn through audio, meaning hearing. Some people learn through visual, meaning seeing. Some people learn from hands-on activity, meaning physical. I say all of this to say that if one student can only understand a concept through audio, then it's up to the teacher to teach that student using audio techniques versus you having 6 students that learn from touching or physically being more hands-on. It is up to the teacher and educator to help students learn the best ways that the student grasps the classwork. Now, even if you just have one student that only learns through audio, you can still, as a teacher, teach all the different ways. That way you're including all of your students in learning this one way, so that one student that's learning audioly won't feel left out, because now everyone in the class is learning. I attached a hyperlink from where I got these 3 strategies, and I would like to share some of them with you. It's a website where you can go and there's 18 different ways to show inclusion within your classroom. And this is on teachhub.com. Here's one. Pre-plan lessons with structural objects, but also allow for inter/slash post planning. Meaning, go ahead and try and set up your lesson plans, but then also be prepared you may have to change it depending on the kind of students that you have in your classroom. Teaching to the strengths to help students compensate for weaknesses, such as hopping to math facts if a child loves to move about but hates numbers. Meaning, just play a game. Sometimes it's not easy for students to learn a certain concept. So why not make it fun? If you want to do a multiplication problem and say, what's 4 times 4? 16. Let them do 16 hopscotches or 16 jumping rope. Just something to get them still learning the material, but in a different way. And that would be more hands-on, what I just talked about. I want to just go over one more. Increase student self-awareness of levels and progress. Meaning, the exposure the way that you expose your students. Meaning, you have to remember that not every student does everything on the same level, and you have to teach your students at their level. And it could be time consuming, but you have to, as a teacher and as an educator, you have to make sure that all the needs are being met for all of your students. Okay, now back to the presentation. Elevator music, right? I have to figure out how to get back. Go to view, present. Okay. Now that that's out the way, I want to talk about how inclusion doesn't work so well in classrooms. But I only want to stress one point. I know this should be a simple concept because inclusion is making sure that everyone feels included. However, sometimes it's not easy. The only point that I would really want to stress about the way inclusion doesn't work in classroom is when the teacher focuses too much on the difference between a disabled student and a quote-unquote able student. And what I mean by this is all students, disability or not, are not the same. And whether you're a regular student or you're not, you don't want to single out any of your students. And you don't want a student, let's say, that has autism to feel like they're getting picked on because you're always talking to them, or you're always, let me help you, let me do this. My suggestion to try and help that would be, sometimes like during recess, or, having moments with that student, but not always doing it around their peers because they may feel singled out. And then also you have the possibility of making the other students feel like you are too much focused on that one student to where they feel like they're not getting the learning that they should be getting. It's a hard way to try and balance inclusion within your school, but that's basically what inclusion is. You're trying to balance out your classroom to make sure one doesn't feel too focused on, but the other ones don't feel like they're not paying much attention on. And it's just a very big balance. Recap on inclusion. I have 3 rules when it comes to inclusion. But first, before I get to those 3 rules, I want to go back over what I talked about. Strategies, which were modifications as needed in the classroom. Which another one was teaching in chunks, which basically just spread out everything that you learn or that you're teaching your students. And the last one was various different ways through audio, physical, and or visual learning. Those were my 3, that's the whole recap of inclusion in a classroom. My 3 rules that I would love for everyone to hopefully leave with this would be applying strategies that deal with inclusion, which were the ones I just recapped, or there's hundreds other ones that you can look at. Modifying and accommodations and singling out. I hope that during my presentation, I was able to give you an inside look on inclusion, and I just want to leave you with a few notes and or pointers for future educators out there like myself. Number 1, implement some strategies to allow students to feel that you are making an effort to include everyone and into everything. Number 2, modifications and accommodations based on students' needs. Number 3, and I stress number 3 a lot, don't let any of your students feel like they're being singled out or not paid enough attention to. No one likes to be that person that's always under the teacher's eye. Just remember, inclusion means making sure everyone is getting the same curriculum, just maybe in a different way. I hope that I was able to keep your attention for this 10-minute presentation, and I hope that you left feeling like you knew what inclusion means and that you'll be able to do it when you start teaching. And hopefully I can do the same. Thank you, and bye.